When they found Vanessa Moore's body in that cheap motel room, needle marks dotting her arms, they thought they'd written the perfect ending. Just another junkie who'd lost her way. No one would question it. No one would dig deeper. They didn't count on her son. On a rain-slicked street, an 8-year-old boy runs up to Officer Daniel Carter, grabs his uniform, and says the words that will unravel decades of carefully buried secrets. "You're my dad. Mom told me to find you if something happened." But Daniel Carter isn't anyone's father. The DNA test proves it. And now people are dying, records are vanishing, and a shadowy government program will stop at nothing to get their hands on one little boy. They think they're hunting a child. They're wrong. They're hunting the final move in a dead woman's game. And Vanessa Moore just put all her pieces in place. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. And if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely don't want to miss. The evening sun cast long shadows across the cracked pavement as Officer Daniel Carter approached the front door of the small suburban house. Red and blue lights from his patrol car painted the white siding in alternating flashes, drawing curious neighbors to their windows. The muffled sounds of an argument leaked through the walls, punctuated by the sharp crash of something breaking inside. "Mrs. Walsh?" Daniel called out, his knuckles rapping firmly against the door. At 38, he'd responded to more domestic calls than he cared to count, but each one still twisted something in his gut. The arguing inside went quiet, too quiet. "Police, open the door, please." His hand instinctively moved to rest on his holstered weapon, not drawing it, but ready. Years on the force had taught him to read situations like this, and the sudden silence never heralded anything good. The door creaked open, revealing a woman with disheveled blonde hair and a bruise forming under her right eye. Her trembling fingers clutched the doorframe as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. "I'm fine, officer. Everything's fine." Her voice wavered, betraying the lie in her words. Daniel noticed how she held her left arm protectively against her ribs, a telltale sign he'd seen too many times before. "Ma'am, I need to come in and make sure everyone's safe." His voice remained firm but gentle, the tone he'd perfected over years of similar calls. Someone reported hearing a disturbance. A man's voice boomed from inside, slurred with alcohol and anger. "We don't need no cops here. Mind your own business." Daniel straightened his shoulders, using his full height to his advantage as he addressed the unseen man. "Sir, I'm coming in to ensure everyone's safety. That's not negotiable." His eyes never left Mrs. Walsh's face, watching as fear and relief battled across her features. The next 20 minutes played out like a well-rehearsed dance, the angry husband pacing like a caged animal, hurling threats and excuses in equal measure. The frightened wife trying to minimize the situation, making the same promises she'd probably made before. Daniel maintained his professional demeanor, documenting everything while carefully positioning himself between the couple. "He didn't mean it," Mrs. Walsh whispered as Daniel escorted her to her sister's waiting car. "He just gets this way sometimes when he drinks." The words were so familiar they could have been lifted from any number of similar cases in Daniel's career. "You don't have to go back," he told her quietly, holding the car door open. "There are people who can help, places you can stay." She gave him a sad smile, one he'd seen countless times before. "It's not that simple, Officer Carter." Daniel watched the sedan pull away, its taillights bleeding into the gathering darkness. His report would join countless others in the system. Another domestic dispute, another cycle of violence temporarily interrupted, but not broken. The weight of it settled on his shoulders like a familiar but unwelcome companion. The sun had fully set by the time he finished his paperwork, leaving the street bathed in the artificial glow of sodium vapor lamps. He rolled his shoulders, trying to shake off the tension of the day. One more hour until his shift ended. One more hour until he could return to his empty apartment and try to forget the look in Mrs. Walsh's eyes. That's when he heard it. The rapid padding of small feet on concrete. "Dad! Dad!" Daniel turned, more out of reflex than anything else. A small black boy was running toward him, tears streaming down his face. Before Daniel could react, the child crashed into his legs, tiny, hands gripping his uniform pants with desperate strength. "You're my dad." The words hit Daniel like a physical blow. He looked around, expecting to see someone chasing the boy or calling out for him, but the street had gone eerily still. Nearby pedestrians had stopped to stare, and even his fellow officers, loading equipment into their cruisers, had frozen in place. His partner, Ryan Mitchell, took a step forward. Concern etched on his features. Daniel held up a hand, signaling him to wait. Slowly, he knelt down, bringing himself eye level with the child. The boy couldn't have been more than 8 years old, wearing clothes that looked like they hadn't been washed in days. His dark eyes were red-rimmed from crying, but they held onto Daniel's gaze with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "Hey there, buddy," Daniel said softly, using the same gentle tone he'd perfected over years of dealing with traumatized witnesses. "I think you might have me confused with someone else. I'm Officer Carter. What's your name?" The boy shook his head violently, his grip on Daniel's uniform tightening until his knuckles showed white. "I'm Elijah. You're my dad. Mama told me to find you if something happened." His voice cracked on the word "mama," fresh tears spilling down his cheeks. Daniel felt his throat tighten. "Elijah, that's not possible. I don't have any children." He tried to keep his voice kind but firm. "Where's your mother? Is she nearby?" "Mama's gone," Elijah whispered, his lower lip trembling. "She said you'd come for me, she promised." A small crowd had gathered now, watching the scene unfold. Daniel could hear the whispers, see the judgmental looks being cast his way. Some had their phones out, no doubt recording the encounter. His skin prickled under their scrutiny. "Officer Carter." A woman stepped forward from the crowd, wringing her hands nervously. She was middle-aged, wearing a postal worker's uniform, her face etched with concern. "I live in the apartment complex down the block. I've seen this boy wandering around for the past few days. His mother, Vanessa Moore, she passed away about 3 weeks ago." The name hit Daniel like ice water in his veins. Vanessa Moore. He hadn't heard that name in nearly 9 years, but it still had the power to make his heart skip a beat. Memories he'd buried deep came rushing back. Her smile, her laugh, the way she'd disappeared without a word. "That's not possible," Daniel muttered, more to himself than anyone else. He looked at Elijah again, really looked at him. The boy's features were nothing like his own, but there was something in those eyes that made him pause, something familiar and haunting. "I need to call this in," Daniel said, reaching for his radio. His hand was steadier than he expected as he requested Child Protective Services. Elijah's grip never loosened, even as Daniel tried to create some space between them. "Please don't leave me," Elijah begged, his voice barely above a whisper. "Mama said you'd protect me. She said you were the only one who could." The words sent a chill down Daniel's spine. Before he could respond, a CPS car pulled up to the curb. Hannah Fielding stepped out, her sensible shoes clicking against the pavement. As she approached, Daniel had worked with her before. She was good at her job, compassionate but professional. "Hello, Elijah," Hannah said, crouching down beside them. Her voice was warm, practiced in the art of comforting frightened children. "I'm here to help you, okay?" Elijah shook his head frantically, pressing himself closer to Daniel. "No, I want to stay with my dad." Hannah's eyes met Daniel's, questioning. He shook his head slightly. "There must be some mistake. His mother and I, it wasn't—" He stumbled over the words, feeling the weight of everyone's stares. "I've reviewed the initial report," Hannah said quietly, keeping her voice low enough that only Daniel could hear. "Vanessa Moore left no emergency contacts, no family members we could locate. Elijah's been alone in their apartment since she passed." Daniel felt sick. 3 weeks. This child had been alone for 3 weeks, waiting for someone to come for him. Waiting for his father, who he believed was Daniel, to save him. The thought of Elijah sitting alone in an empty apartment, watching the days pass, made something twist painfully in Daniel's chest. "Buddy," Daniel said gently, trying to pry Elijah's fingers from his uniform, "you need to go with Ms. Fielding. She's going to make sure you're safe and taken care of." "You promised!" Elijah's scream cut through the evening air like a knife. Mama said you promised to always be there if she couldn't. Daniel stood up abruptly, taking a step back. I never made any such promise. I'm sorry, but I'm not your father. The words came out harsher than he intended, making Elijah flinch as if he'd been struck. Hannah moved forward smoothly, placing herself between Daniel and the boy. Come on, Elijah. Let's get you somewhere warm and safe. No, please, Elijah tried to dodge around her, reaching for Daniel. Please, Dad, don't let them take me. Daniel backed away, each step feeling like lead. He could feel Ryan's hand on his shoulder, offering silent support, but all he could focus on was Elijah's desperate face. The boy's eyes held a trust so absolute, so unshakable, that it physically hurt to look at him. It'll be okay, Elijah, Hannah soothed, gently guiding him toward her car. We're going to take good care of you. Daniel watched as Hannah led the resistant child toward her vehicle. Elijah kept looking back, his eyes locked on Daniel until the last possible moment. Just before Hannah helped him into the back seat, Elijah called out one last time, his voice carrying across the now quiet street. Mama told me you'd come for me. The car door closed with a soft thud, and Daniel turned away. He could feel Ryan's questioning gaze, could sense the curiosity radiating from the gathered crowd, but he couldn't deal with any of it right now. He walked back to his cruiser, his movements mechanical, trying to ignore the way his hands had started to shake. As he slid behind the wheel, Daniel caught his reflection in the rearview mirror. The face that stared back at him looked older somehow, worn down by the weight of what had just happened. He started the engine, watching in the side mirror as Hannah's car pulled away from the curb. Something deep inside him stirred, a memory he couldn't quite grasp, a face he'd tried so hard to forget. Vanessa's face. 9 years ago, she'd stood in the rain outside his apartment, promising to call him the next day. He'd watched her walk away, never knowing it would be the last time he'd see her. What had happened to her in those 9 years? What could have made her tell her son that Daniel was his father? And more importantly, what had she been afraid of? The desperation in Elijah's voice when he said Daniel was the only one who could protect him echoed in his mind. No, not his son. The DNA test would prove that. It had to. Daniel put the car in drive, but his eyes kept drifting to the rearview mirror, watching until Hannah's taillights disappeared around a corner. Only then did he realize he'd been holding his breath. He let it out slowly, trying to push away the image of Elijah's trusting eyes, the feeling of those small hands clutching his uniform. It wasn't his problem. It couldn't be his problem. He had a job to do, a life to live. Whatever Vanessa had told her son, whatever reason she had for pointing him toward Daniel, it wasn't his responsibility. But as he pulled away from the curb, heading back to the precinct to finish his shift, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Somewhere in the back of his mind, a small voice whispered that he was leaving something important behind, something that would change his life forever. The streetlights blurred past his window, each one casting shadows that seemed to dance with secrets. Secrets that Vanessa had taken to her grave. Secrets that had somehow led her son straight to him. Daniel tightened his grip on the steering wheel, forcing himself to focus on the road ahead, but he couldn't stop his mind from wandering back to that last night with Vanessa. She'd been different then, distracted. Had she known even then that she was going to disappear? Had she been running from something even back then? The precinct loomed ahead, its familiar outline offering no comfort tonight. Daniel parked in his usual spot, but he couldn't bring himself to get out of the car just yet. Instead, he sat there, watching his hands grip the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. It's not my problem, he whispered to the empty car. But even as the words left his mouth, he knew they were a lie. Whatever was going on, whatever Vanessa had been involved in, it had found its way to his doorstep in the form of a desperate 8-year-old boy, and something told him this was just the beginning. Daniel finally stepped out of his car, the evening air feeling heavier than it had just hours ago. The weight of Elijah's words, of Vanessa's ghost, settled around his shoulders like a cloak he couldn't shake off. As he walked into the precinct, he tried to convince himself that tomorrow would be just another day, but deep down he knew better. Tomorrow would bring questions he wasn't ready to answer, memories he wasn't prepared to face, and a truth he might not want to know. The truth about Vanessa, about Elijah, and about whatever darkness had driven them both into his life. The precinct. Door closed behind him with a final sounding click, leaving the night to keep its secrets for just a little while longer. But as Daniel made his way to his desk, he couldn't shake the feeling that those secrets wouldn't stay buried for long. And when they finally came to light, he had a feeling his life would never be the same. Daniel lay in his darkened bedroom, staring at the ceiling as the digital clock on his nightstand ticked past 3 a.m. Sleep refused to come. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Elijah's face, those desperate, trusting eyes that seemed to bore straight through him. The boy's words echoed in his mind. "Mama told me to find you." The ceiling fan spun lazily above him, its shadows dancing across the walls. Daniel had always prided himself on compartmentalizing, on being able to leave the job at work. But tonight was different. Tonight, the past he'd carefully buried had come knocking at his door in the form of a child who couldn't possibly be his. Rolling over, he grabbed his phone from the nightstand. His thumb hovered over the photo gallery icon, before finally pressing. He hadn't looked at these pictures in years, but he knew exactly where to find them. 3 folders deep, hidden away like the memories they contained. Vanessa. The first image made his breath catch. There she was, frozen in time, laughing at something off camera. Her dark skin glowed in the summer sunlight, her smile bright enough to light up the whole frame. 9 years hadn't dulled the impact of that smile. "What happened to you, Vanessa?" he whispered to the empty room. "What were you running from?" Sleep wasn't coming tonight. Daniel threw off the covers and padded to the kitchen. The microwave clock cast a harsh green glow as he poured himself a glass of water. Through his apartment window, the city lights twinkled like distant stars, each one holding its own stories, its own secrets. His phone buzzed on the counter. A text from Ryan. "You okay, partner?" That was some heavy stuff today. Daniel stared at the message for a long moment before typing back, "I'm fine. Just need some sleep." The lie felt hollow, even as he sent it. He wasn't fine. How could he be? Somewhere in this city, a little boy who thought Daniel was his father was sleeping in a strange bed, probably just as sleepless as he was. Morning came too quickly, the sun creeping through his blinds to find him still sitting at his kitchen counter, surrounded by old memories and unanswered questions. He'd spent hours scrolling through social media, searching for any trace of Vanessa's life in the years since she'd disappeared. There wasn't much, a few tagged photos from years ago, an abandoned profile that hadn't been updated since 2019. The precinct was buzzing with energy when Daniel walked in, but he felt disconnected from it all, moving through the morning briefing, like a ghost. He could feel the sideways glances from his colleagues, could hear the whispers that stopped when he got too close. Well, if it isn't Daddy dearest." Ryan's voice cut through Daniel's fog as his partner dropped into the chair, beside his desk. Despite the teasing words, concern showed clearly in Ryan's eyes. "You look like hell, man," Daniel grunted, taking a long sip of his coffee. "Thanks for the update." Seriously, though, Ryan leaned closer, lowering his voice. "What's the story? With this kid? You never mentioned having a thing with a black woman." "Because it wasn't a thing," Daniel snapped, then immediately regretted his tone. He ran a hand through his hair, sighing. "Look, it was 9 years ago. Vanessa and we dated for a few months. Then she disappeared. No explanation, no goodbye, nothing. Until yesterday, I hadn't heard her name in almost a decade." Ryan whistled, low. "And now her kid shows up claiming you're his father? That's some soap opera stuff right there." "He's not mine." Daniel's voice was firm, but something twisted in his gut as he said the words. "The timeline doesn't even make sense. Elijah's 8, which means she was already pregnant when you were together," Ryan finished. Or nothing. It's impossible." Daniel stood up abruptly, needing to move, to do something. "I need some air." The precinct's roof had always been his sanctuary, a place to clear his head when cases got too heavy. The morning air was crisp, carrying the promise of autumn. Below, the city was waking up, streets filling with people going about their normal lives. How many of them were carrying secrets like Vanessa's? The door behind him creaked open. "Thought I'd find you up here." Captain Sarah Martinez's voice was gentle but firm. "We need to talk about yesterday." Daniel didn't turn around. "There's nothing to talk about." The boy was confused. "CPS is handling it." "Is that why you pulled up Vanessa Moore's case file at 4 a.m.? Now he did turn, surprised. The captain held up a hand before he could speak. "The system logs everything, Carter. Want to tell me what you're looking for?" Daniel hesitated, then decided on the truth. Something doesn't feel right. Vanessa wasn't perfect, but she was smart, determined. She wanted to go to law school, had her whole life planned out. Then she vanishes, and 9 years later she's found dead in a motel room? People change, Daniel. Addiction? No. He cut her off. "You didn't know her. This doesn't make sense." The captain studied him for a long moment. The talk screen showed heroin in her system. There were track marks on her arms. Sometimes the simplest explanation is the right one. But Daniel was already shaking his head. "Then why tell Elijah I was his father? Why tell him to find me if something happened to her? Maybe she felt guilty. Maybe she wanted her son to have someone to turn to, or maybe—" The captain paused, choosing her words carefully. "Maybe she was just too far gone to think clearly." The words stung, even though Daniel knew they were meant to be kind. He turned back to the city view, his hands gripping the railing. "I need to know for sure. I'm going to take the DNA test." "Already scheduled," Captain Martinez said, surprising him again. "CPS called this morning. They're expediting it given the circumstances." Daniel nodded, grateful for her efficiency if nothing else. A DNA test would put this whole thing to rest. Prove once and for all that Elijah wasn't his responsibility, that whatever Vanessa had been involved in, it had nothing to do with him. So why did the thought fill him with such dread? The rest of the morning passed in a blur of paperwork and routine calls. Daniel went through the motions, but his mind kept drifting back to Elijah. What was the boy doing right now? Was he scared? Alone? Did he still believe Daniel would come for him? Around noon, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. His heart skipped a beat when he read it. "He won't stop asking for you." It was Hannah Fielding from CPS. Daniel stared at the message, his thumb hovering over the keyboard. Finally, he typed back, "How is he?" The response came quickly. "Scared. Confused. He refuses to talk to anyone else. Maybe if you came by." Daniel closed his eyes, letting out a slow breath. He should say no, should maintain professional distance, should wait for the DNA test results. What's the address? 20 minutes later, he pulled into the parking lot of the CPS center. It was a plain building, trying too hard to look cheerful. With its bright murals and colorful playground equipment, Daniel sat in his car for a long moment, questioning his decision to come. The choice was made for him when a small face appeared in one of the windows. Even from this distance, he could see Elijah's eyes light up with recognition. The boy disappeared from view, and seconds later, the front door burst open. "Dad!" Elijah ran across the parking lot, ignoring Hannah's calls to stop. Daniel moved without thinking, meeting the boy halfway. Elijah crashed into him with the same desperate energy as yesterday, small arms wrapping around Daniel's waist. "You came back," Elijah whispered into Daniel's uniform. "I knew you would." Daniel's hands moved of their own accord, resting on Elijah's shoulders. The boy was trembling slightly, and Daniel could feel the dampness of tears soaking through his shirt. Hannah approached more slowly, her expression a mixture of relief and concern. "He hasn't eaten since yesterday. Wouldn't sleep. Just kept saying his dad would come." The words hit Daniel like a physical blow. He looked down at Elijah. Really, looked at him. The boy's clothes had been changed, CPS issue probably, but his eyes held the same unwavering trust as before. "Why don't we go inside?" Hannah suggested gently. "We can talk in my office." Elijah's grip tightened. "You won't leave again?" "Daniel, Should say no. Should explain that he wasn't really Elijah's father, that this was all a mistake. Instead, he heard himself say, "I'll stay for a while." Hannah's office was designed to be kid-friendly, with comfortable chairs and toys scattered around. Elijah refused to let go of Daniel's hand as they sat down, as if afraid he might disappear if they lost physical contact. "Elijah," Hannah began softly, "can you tell Officer Carter what your mom told you about him?" The boy's face scrunched up in concentration. She said if anything ever happened to her, I should find you, that you were a police officer and you'd protect me." "Protect you from what?" Daniel asked, keeping his voice gentle. Elijah shook his head, pressing closer to Daniel's side. "She didn't say. She just made me memorize your name and what you looked like from an old picture. She said you were my dad, and that you'd keep me safe." Daniel exchanged glances with Hannah over Elijah's head. Something about this wasn't adding up. Why would Vanessa spend years telling her son about a man who wasn't his father? What had she been so afraid of? "Elijah," Daniel said carefully, "your mom and we haven't seen each other in a very long time, almost 9 years." "I know," Elijah said quietly. "She showed me the picture every year on my birthday. Said it was important I never forget your face." The revelation sent a chill down Daniel's spine. Every year? Vanessa had been showing Elijah his picture every year. Why? What possible reason could she have had for maintaining that connection? Before he could ask more questions, his phone buzzed. A text from Ryan. "You need to see this. Vanessa's talk screen just came back with some weird results." Daniel's heart rate picked up. "I have to go," he said, standing slowly. "Police business." Elijah's face crumpled. "Please don't leave. I'll be good, I promise. I won't cause any trouble." "Hey." Daniel knelt down, bringing himself eye level with the boy. "I'm not leaving because of you, I just have some work to do, important work." "About my mom?" Daniel hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, about your mom." Elijah's next words made his blood run cold. "Are you going to find the bad man?" "What bad man?" Daniel asked sharply, perhaps too sharply, because Elijah flinched. I don't know," the boy whispered. "Mom never said. She just told me that if the bad man ever came, I had to run, had to find you." Daniel looked at Hannah, who was already taking notes. Something was very wrong here. Whatever had happened to Vanessa, whatever had led her to tell Elijah these things, it wasn't as simple as a tragic overdose. "I'll come back," Daniel found himself promising. "Tomorrow, okay?" Elijah studied his face intently, as if searching for any sign of deception. Finally, he nodded. "You promise?" "I promise." As Daniel walked back to his car, his mind was racing. The talk screen, Elijah's comments about a bad man, Vanessa's years of preparation, none of it added up to a simple case of addiction and tragedy. His phone buzzed again. Another text from Ryan. "Seriously, partner, you need to see this. Something's not right." Daniel started his car, his decision made. He'd spent 9 years trying to forget Vanessa Moore. Now, it seemed, the past wasn't done with him yet. As he pulled out of the parking lot, he caught a glimpse of Elijah in his rearview mirror. The boy stood at the window, one small hand pressed against the glass, watching him drive away. The image stayed with him all the way back to the precinct. That lonely figure at the window, waiting for a father who might not really be his father, but who might be his only hope. The truth was out there, buried in 9 years of secrets and lies, and Daniel was going to find it, whether he was ready for it or not. The manila envelope sat unopened on Daniel's desk, the fluorescent lights of the precinct reflecting off its smooth surface. He'd been staring at it for 15 minutes, his coffee growing cold beside him. Inside was the answer he'd been waiting for, the DNA test results that would prove once and for all that Elijah wasn't his son. So why couldn't he bring himself to open it? "You planning on using telepathy to read that thing?" Ryan's voice cut through his thoughts. His partner dropped into the chair across from him, reaching for the envelope. Daniel's hand shot out, stopping him. "Don't." Ryan raised his eyebrows, but withdrew his hand. The results aren't going to change if you keep staring at them. Might as well rip off the Band-Aid. He was right, of course. Daniel took a deep breath and picked up the envelope. The paper made a soft tearing sound as he opened it, the sound somehow too loud in the quiet morning precinct. He pulled out the single sheet of paper inside, his eyes scanning the medical jargon until they landed on the conclusion. His heart stopped. Well? Ryan leaned forward, trying to read Daniel's expression. What's the verdict? Daniel's voice felt strange in his throat. Negative. There's no genetic match. I'm not his father. The words hung in the air between them. Daniel had expected to feel relief. This was what he'd been waiting for. Proof that whatever was going on with Vanessa and Elijah, it wasn't his responsibility. Instead, he felt empty. That's good news, right? Ryan watched him carefully. Means you're off the hook. Before Daniel could respond, a commotion erupted from the precinct entrance. A child's voice rang out, high and desperate. No, I want to see my dad. Daniel was on his feet before he realized he was moving. Elijah was there, struggling against Hannah Fielding's gentle restraint. The boy's face was streaked with tears, his small body trembling with emotion. Elijah? Daniel moved forward, confused. What's going on? Officer Carter. Hannah's voice was strained. I'm sorry. He overheard me talking about the DNA results on the phone. He ran off. I barely caught. Up with him. Elijah broke free from Hannah's grip and ran to Daniel, wrapping his arms around his waist. They're lying. You are my dad. Mama wouldn't lie to me. The precinct had gone quiet, all eyes on the scene unfolding. Daniel could feel the weight of their stares, the mixture of pity and curiosity in their gazes. Slowly, he knelt down to Elijah's level. Buddy, we need to talk. Come on, let's go somewhere private. He led Elijah to the break room, away from the prying eyes. The boy's hand clutched his tightly, as if afraid Daniel might disappear. Hannah followed, closing the door behind them. Elijah, Daniel began gently. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes. Sometimes they tell us things that aren't. No! Elijah's shout was raw with pain. Mama wouldn't lie. She made me promise to find you. She said you were the only one who could keep me safe. Safe from what, Elijah? Daniel pressed, seizing the opportunity. What was your mom afraid of? But Elijah just shook his head, fresh tears spilling down his cheeks. She said you'd believe me. She promised you'd help. Hannah stepped forward, her voice soft but firm. Elijah, I know this is hard to understand, but the test shows that Officer Carter isn't your biological father. That means, I don't care what the test says. Elijah's voice cracked with desperation. He's my dad. Mama showed me his picture every year. She told me stories about him. She said, the boy's voice trailed off into sobs. Daniel felt something break inside him as he watched Elijah cry. Without thinking, he pulled the boy into a hug, feeling the small body shake against him. Why would she lie? Elijah whispered into Daniel's shirt. Why would she make me memorize your face if you weren't my dad? It was a good question, one that had been nagging at Daniel since this whole thing began. Why would Vanessa spend years preparing her son to find a man who wasn't his father? What had she been so afraid of that she'd construct such an elaborate lie? Hannah cleared her throat softly. Elijah, there's a nice family waiting to meet you. They have experience with children who've lost their parents, and they're very excited to— No! Elijah's grip on Daniel tightened. I want to stay with my dad. I'm not your father, Elijah. The words felt like ash in Daniel's mouth. The test proves it. Then why did you come back yesterday? Why did you promise to protect me? Daniel had no answer for that. He looked at Hannah helplessly, but her expression was professionally neutral. She'd seen too many painful separations to let it affect her anymore. Come on, Elijah, she said gently. Let's give Officer Carter some space. Wait. Daniel surprised himself by speaking. Can I have a minute with him? Alone? Hannah hesitated, then nodded. 5 minutes. I'll be right outside. When the door closed behind her, Daniel sat down at the break room table, gesturing for Elijah to take the chair next. To him, the boy did, his eyes never leaving Daniel's face. "Listen to me, Elijah. I need you to tell me everything your mom ever said about me, everything she told you to do if something happened to her." Elijah wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. She said if she ever disappeared, I should wait 3 days. Then I should find you. She made me memorize where you worked, what you looked like. Did she say why she might disappear?" The boy shook his head. "Just that if the bad man ever came back, I had to run. Had to find you." "Did you ever see this bad man?" Elijah's face scrunched up in concentration. "Once, I think. I was supposed to be sleeping, but I heard voices. Mom was crying. When I looked through the door crack, I saw a man in a nice suit. Mom was scared of him." Daniel leaned forward. "When was this?" "A few months ago. After that, we moved to a new apartment. Mom said we had to be extra careful." A knock at the door interrupted them. Hannah poked her head in. "Time's up." Daniel stood, his mind racing with this new information. As Hannah led Elijah toward the door, the boy turned back one last time. "Please don't give up on me," he whispered. "Please don't let them take me away." The door closed behind them, leaving Daniel alone with his thoughts. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through his recent calls until he found the number he was looking for. "Tanya, this is Officer Daniel Carter. We need to talk about Vanessa." 2 hours later, Daniel sat across from Tanya Lawson in a small coffee shop 3 blocks from the precinct. She looked different from the last time he'd seen her. Older, more worn down by life. But her eyes still held the same sharp intelligence he remembered. "I wondered if you'd come asking questions," she said, stirring her untouched coffee. "When I heard about Vanessa—" "What happened to her, Tanya? The real story, not the official one." Tanya glanced around the coffee shop nervously before leaning forward. "You have to understand, Vanessa was complicated, but she wasn't a junkie. Something happened during that year she disappeared." "What year?" "Right after she left you. She vanished for almost a year. When she came back, she had Elijah." Daniel's heart rate picked up. "Did she ever say where she'd been?" "No, but she was different, scared. Started looking over her shoulder all the time. That's when she began showing Elijah your picture, telling him you were his father." "But I'm not." Daniel's voice was flat. "The DNA test proved it." Tanya gave him a long look. "Maybe not by blood, but Vanessa wasn't lying when she said you were the only one who could protect him." "Protect him from what?" "I don't know exactly, but about 6 months ago she came to my place in the middle of the night. She was terrified, said someone had found her, said she'd seen something she shouldn't have years ago." "The man in the suit," Daniel muttered. Tanya's eyes widened. "You know about him?" "Elijah mentioned seeing him, said Vanessa was scared of him. She called him the ghost." Tanya's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "Said he could make people disappear without a trace. That's why she needed you, because you were the only honest cop she ever knew." Daniel sat back, his mind spinning. "Why didn't she come to me when she was in trouble? Why wait until she was dead?" Tanya's laugh was bitter. "Because she knew they were watching her. Said the only way to keep Elijah safe was to make it look like she had no connection to you. That's why she never contacted you, why she made it seem like she'd fallen into addiction. But she made sure Elijah would find me, because she knew if anything happened to her, they'd come for him next." Tanya reached into her bag, pulling out a worn envelope. "She left this with me, made me promise to give it to you if anything happened to her." Daniel took the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a single photograph, Vanessa holding a newborn Elijah. On the back, in her neat handwriting, "The truth is in the numbers. You'll know where to look." "What does it mean?" he asked. Tanya shook her head. "I don't know. But whatever Vanessa was mixed up in, it got her killed. Those track marks on her arms, they were fresh, too fresh, like someone wanted to make sure the overdose story would stick." Daniel stared at the photograph, at Vanessa's smiling face. She'd known she was in danger, had spent years preparing for the worst, and when the worst finally came, she'd made sure. Her son would find the one person she trusted to uncover the truth. His phone buzzed. A text from Hannah. Elijah's being moved to a foster home tomorrow. Thought you should know. Daniel looked at the picture again, then at Tanya. The man in the suit. Would you recognize him, if you saw him again? Maybe. Why? Because I'm not letting this go. Vanessa might not have been telling the truth about me being Elijah's father, but she was telling the truth about something. And I'm going to find out what it was. Tanya reached across the table, gripping his arm. Be careful, Daniel. The people who killed Vanessa, they're powerful, connected. You start digging, they'll come for you too. Let them try. Daniel stood up, tucking the photograph into his pocket. I made a promise to protect that boy. DNA test or not, I intend to keep it. As he walked back to the precinct, Daniel's mind was racing. The truth was in the numbers Vanessa had written. What numbers? Where was he supposed to look? His phone buzzed again, Ryan this time. Partner, you need to see this. Found something weird in Vanessa's bank records. Daniel picked up his pace. The web of lies was starting to unravel, thread by thread. Somewhere in this mess of secrets and half-truths was the real reason Vanessa had died. The real reason she'd made sure her son would find Daniel, and he was going to find it no matter the cost. Because DNA test or not, Elijah was counting on him. And this time, Daniel wasn't walking away. Daniel stared at the computer screen, his eyes burning from hours of searching through digital records. Elijah's birth certificate should have been easy to find. It was a basic public record after all. But it wasn't there. Not in the state database, not in the hospital records, not anywhere. It's like he doesn't exist, Ryan muttered, leaning over Daniel's shoulder. How is that possible? Daniel rubbed his tired eyes. Add it to the growing list of things that don't make sense. He clicked through another database search. No school records either, at least not under Elijah Moore. Maybe Vanessa used a different name. Maybe. Daniel sat back in his chair, thinking. What did you find in those bank records? Ryan pulled up a chair, lowering his voice despite the empty precinct. It was well past midnight, but neither of them could bring themselves to leave. That's the weird part. Vanessa Moore barely had any transactions in the months before she died. No rent payments, no utility bills, nothing. She was paying cash? That's just it. There were no cash withdrawals either. It's like she was living off the grid. Ryan pulled out his notebook. But here's where it gets interesting. Every 3 months, exactly $5,000 would appear in her account. No source listed, no transaction history. The money would sit there for exactly 12 hours, then disappear again. Daniel leaned forward. Someone was laundering money through her account? Looks like it. But why keep the same pattern for years? It's like they wanted to leave a trail. Before Daniel could respond, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Leave it alone, Officer Carter. Daniel showed the message to Ryan, whose face darkened. They're watching you. Good. Daniel's voice was hard. Means we're getting close to something. A noise from down the hall made them both turn. At this hour, the precinct should have been empty except for the skeleton night crew. Daniel's hand moved instinctively to his weapon as he stood. Check the security cameras, he whispered to Ryan, moving toward the sound. The hallway was dark, lit only by the emergency exit signs. Daniel moved silently, years of training taking over. Another sound, metal on metal, like someone picking a lock. It was coming from the evidence room. Daniel pressed himself against the wall, inching closer to the corner. He could hear someone moving inside the room, papers rustling, drawers opening and closing. His radio crackled softly. Ryan's voice, barely a whisper. Cameras are down, complete blackout. Daniel drew his weapon, took a deep breath, and rounded the corner. The evidence room door was ajar, a slim beam of flashlight visible through the gap. Daniel could make out a figure moving inside, methodically going through the files. Police! Don't move! The figure froze for a split second, then the flashlight beam swung toward Daniel's face, blinding him. He heard rather than saw the person, rush past him, knocking him off balance. Ryan, suspect heading your way. Daniel recovered and gave chase, his feet pounding against the linoleum floor. Ahead, he could hear the fire exit door slam open. He burst through it seconds later, emerging into the cool night air. The parking lot was empty. No sign of movement, no sound of running feet. Whoever it was, they knew what they were doing. Ryan joined him, breathing hard. Lost them. But look, what they dropped. In his hand was a crumpled piece of paper. Daniel smoothed it out under the parking lot lights. It was a photocopy of Vanessa's autopsy report, but not the official one he'd seen before. This one had different numbers, different findings. They're cleaning up, Daniel muttered. Replacing records, erasing evidence. We need to check Vanessa's apartment, Ryan said. If they're destroying evidence here. They didn't finish the sentence. Both were already running to Daniel's car. The drive to Vanessa's apartment was tense, filled with unspoken fears. What if they were too late? What if whoever had broken into the precinct was already there, destroying whatever clues Vanessa might have left behind? The apartment building was quiet, most windows dark. Daniel and Ryan took the stairs, not trusting the elderly elevator. The crime scene tape across Vanessa's door was intact, but something felt wrong. Daniel pulled out his keys, finding the one he'd been given as the investigating officer. The lock turned smoothly, but when he pushed the door open, his heart sank. The apartment had been ransacked. Drawers pulled out, furniture overturned, papers scattered everywhere. Someone had been looking for something specific. Clear the rooms, Daniel ordered, weapon drawn. They moved through the apartment efficiently, checking every corner, every closet. It was empty, but recently disturbed. Some of the papers were still drifting to the floor. We just missed them, Ryan said, holstering his weapon. Question is, did they find what they were looking for? Daniel moved to the bedroom, where the destruction was worst. The mattress had been slashed open, clothes torn from hangers. Even the air vents had been unscrewed from the walls. Something caught his eye. A framed photo of Elijah that had been knocked to the floor. The glass was cracked, but that wasn't what drew his attention. There was something off about the frame itself. He picked it up, turning it over in his hands. The backing was slightly warped, as if it had been removed and replaced multiple times. Daniel pried it open carefully. Behind the photo was a small notebook, its pages filled with Vanessa's neat handwriting. "Ryan," he called out, his voice tight with anticipation. "I found something." Before he could open it, his phone rang. Hannah Fielding's number. "Officer Carter, there's been a problem." Her voice was strained. "Someone tried to break into the group home where we placed Elijah." Daniel's blood ran cold. "Is he okay?" "He's fine. Our security stopped them." "But Daniel, they knew exactly which room he was in. Someone told them. I'm coming to get him." Daniel was already moving toward the door, the notebook clutched in his hand. "You can't. You're not his legal guardian, and the DNA test. Someone just broke into the precinct and destroyed evidence." Daniel cut her off. "They ransacked Vanessa's apartment. Now they're coming for Elijah. Still want to talk about legal guardianship?" There was a long pause. Finally, Hannah sighed. "I'll meet you there. But Daniel, be careful. I think someone in my department might be involved." "What do you mean?" "The foster home placement. It wasn't random. Someone higher up insisted on that specific location. And they rushed it through, bypassing all our usual security checks." Daniel exchanged looks with Ryan. "They wanted to know exactly where he'd be." "Exactly. I've already moved him to a secure location. I'll text you the address." Daniel ended the call, his mind racing. They're moving fast now. Why? What changed? "Maybe they found out we were looking into Vanessa's bank records," Ryan suggested. Or maybe Elijah knows something he's not supposed to." Daniel held up the notebook. "And I bet whatever." It's in here." They headed back to the car, Daniel clutching the notebook like a lifeline. But before they could reach it, his phone buzzed again. Another text from the unknown number. "Last warning, Officer Carter. Walk away, or the boy won't be the only one who needs protection. Daniel showed Ryan the message. His partner whistled low. They're getting desperate. No, Daniel corrected, starting the car. They're getting sloppy. Desperate people don't have time for warnings. As they pulled away from the curb, Daniel caught movement in his rearview mirror. A black SUV pulling out behind them, its headlights off. We've got company, he muttered. Ryan checked the side mirror. Want me to call it in? Not yet. Let's see where they're going. Daniel took a sharp right turn. The SUV followed. Besides, I don't know who we can trust at the precinct right now. They drove through the quiet city streets, the SUV maintaining a steady distance behind them. Daniel took random turns, confirming what he already suspected. They were definitely being followed. What's the plan, partner? Ryan asked, checking his weapon. First, we lose our tail. Then we get to Elijah before they figure out where Hannah moved him. Daniel's phone buzzed with Hannah's text, an address on the outskirts of town. After that, we find out what's in this notebook that's worth killing for. The SUV was getting closer now, its engine growling in the night. Daniel gripped the steering wheel tighter, his mind working through options. Hold on, he warned Ryan, then slammed on the brakes. The SUV swerved to avoid hitting them, giving Daniel the opening he needed. He gunned the engine, taking a sharp turn down a narrow alley. Behind them, tires screeched as the SUV tried to follow. They're not cops, Ryan observed, bracing himself as Daniel took another turn. Too aggressive, no regard for collateral damage. Professional hit squad, Daniel agreed, weaving through the empty streets. Probably the same ones who staged Vanessa's overdose. The SUV was falling behind now, unable to match their speed through the tight city streets. Daniel took advantage of their lead, cutting through a parking garage and emerging on a different street. I think we lost them, Ryan said after a few minutes of scanning their mirrors. For now. Daniel headed toward the address Hannah had sent, but they'll be back. And next time they won't bother with warnings. They drove in silence for a while, both lost in thought. Finally, Ryan spoke up. You know this goes way beyond a simple murder case now, right? Whatever Vanessa was involved, in whatever she was running from, it's big, maybe too big for us to handle alone. I know. Daniel's voice was quiet but determined. But I made a promise to protect that boy, and I'm going to keep it no matter what. Even though he's not your son, Daniel thought about Elijah's trust in him, about Vanessa's years of preparation, about the forces now moving to silence them both. DNA doesn't make a father, Ryan. Besides, Vanessa chose me for a reason. She spent years making sure Elijah would find me if anything happened to her. There has to be a reason for that. Yeah, Ryan said softly. Because she knew you wouldn't walk away, even when things got dangerous. Even when you had every reason to. They pulled up to the address Hannah had sent. A small house on a quiet street, its windows dark except for a single light in the kitchen. Daniel parked a block away, scanning the area for any signs of surveillance. Looks clear, he said, but his hand remained on his weapon. You watch the perimeter. I'll get Elijah. Daniel. Ryan's voice stopped him as he reached for the door handle. Whatever's in that notebook, whatever Vanessa was mixed up in, are you sure you want to know? Sometimes the truth is worse than not knowing. Daniel thought about the look in Elijah's eyes when he'd begged him not to leave. About the desperation in Vanessa's final message. He thought about the forces moving in the shadows, powerful enough to erase records and stage deaths. I'm sure about one thing, he said finally. That boy is in danger. And right now, we're the only ones standing between him and whatever's coming. For him. Ryan nodded, understanding. Go get him. I've got your back. Daniel stepped out of the car, the notebook heavy in his pocket. Somewhere in its pages were the answers they needed. The truth about Vanessa's death, about the man in the suit, about why she'd spent years preparing her son to find Daniel. But, as he walked toward the house, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that uncovering those answers would change everything. Not just for him and Elijah, but for everyone involved in this web of secrets and lies. The truth was waiting in those pages. The question was, were they ready for what it would reveal? Daniel burst through the front door of the safe house, his heart pounding against his ribs. The living room was a battlefield of overturned furniture and scattered papers. A lamp lay shattered on the floor, its light flickering weakly in the darkness. But it was the silence that terrified him most. The complete absence of sound where a frightened 8-year-old boy should have been. "Elijah!" His voice echoed through the empty house. "Hannah!" Ryan appeared from the kitchen, his face grim. "Back door's been forced. Signs of struggle." He held up Hannah's phone, its screen cracked. "Found this under the table. Daniel's world." Narrowed to a single devastating thought. They'd taken Elijah. "How?" He exploded, kicking a fallen chair. "This was supposed to be secure. Hannah said she'd moved him somewhere safe." "Daniel." Ryan's voice cut through his rage. "Look at this." On Hannah's phone was a text message sent just 20 minutes ago. "Change of plans. Moving the boy to secondary location. Authorization. Code 847 Alpha." "That's a real CPS authorization code," Daniel said slowly. "Which means someone high up in the department is involved," Ryan finished. "They used official channels to get to him." Daniel's phone rang. "Hannah." He put it on speaker. "Daniel, I'm so sorry," she gasped. Her voice was strained like she was in pain. "They had badges, proper documentation. I didn't realize until it was too late." "Where are you?" "Hospital. They didn't want to leave witnesses. If a neighbor hadn't heard the commotion." She paused, catching her breath. "But Daniel, I saw something. The car they put Elijah in, it had government plates." Daniel exchanged looks with Ryan. "Did you get the number?" "Better. I managed to plant my department tracker in Elijah's shoe when they weren't looking. Standard procedure for high-risk cases, but they didn't know about it." Hope surged through Daniel's chest. "Send me the tracking link." "Already did, but Daniel, the man in charge, I recognized him. He's been to our office before, meeting with the director. Real smooth type, expensive suit." "The man Elijah saw at their apartment," Daniel cut in. "The one Vanessa was afraid of." "There's more," Hannah continued. "When they were taking Elijah, he said something about Kane wants him intact. Does that mean anything to you?" Daniel's blood ran cold. He looked at Ryan, who was already pulling out his phone, running the name through their database. "Jared Kane," Ryan read from his screen. "Former federal prosecutor, now private sector. Lot of high-profile clients, political connections. And get this, 9 years ago, he led a major trafficking investigation that mysteriously went cold. 9 years, Daniel repeated. The same time Vanessa disappeared. A notification popped up on Daniel's phone. The tracking link from Hannah. A red dot was moving quickly through the city, heading east. "They're taking him to the industrial district," Ryan observed, looking over Daniel's shoulder. "Hannah will call you back." Daniel was already moving toward the door. "Ryan, call it in. We need backup, but only people you trust completely." They raced to the car, Daniel behind the wheel, Ryan coordinating with the few officers they knew weren't compromised. The tracking dot continued its steady movement across the city map. "Why take him alive?" Ryan wondered aloud as they sped through the empty streets. "If they're cleaning up loose ends." "Because Elijah knows something," Daniel realized. "Something in that notebook. They think he knows where it is." The notebook. In the chaos, he'd almost forgotten about it. It was still in his jacket pocket, unread. But there was no time now. Every second brought Elijah closer to whatever fate awaited him at their destination. 2 cars responding, Ryan reported. Officers Mitchell and Rodriguez. They'll approach, from the south, cut off any escape routes. The tracker led them deep into the warehouse district, a maze of abandoned buildings and empty lots. The red dot finally stopped moving. "There." Ryan pointed to a large warehouse set back from the road. "Looks like..." Headlights suddenly flooded their car, an SUV appearing from a side street, engine roaring. Daniel swerved hard, narrowly avoiding a collision. "Same SUV from earlier," Ryan shouted, grabbing his radio. "Officers in pursuit of black SUV, no plates, attempting to run us off the road." The SUV slammed into their rear bumper, sending them fishtailing across the wet pavement. Daniel fought for control, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "They're trying to keep us from the warehouse," he gritted out, accelerating through a turn. "Which means we're getting close to something they don't want us to see." Another impact, harder this time. Their car scraped against a concrete barrier, sparks flying. But Daniel managed to maintain control, his years of pursuit training kicking in. "Construction site ahead," Ryan warned. "They're trying to force us into it." Daniel made a split-second decision. Instead of avoiding the construction zone, he accelerated straight toward it. The SUV followed, just as he'd hoped. "Hold on." He waited until the last possible moment, then yanked the wheel hard. Their car skidded through a narrow gap between two parked excavators. The SUV, larger and less maneuverable, couldn't make the turn. The sound of crunching metal and breaking glass filled the air. "Nice driving." Ryan grinned, but his expression quickly turned serious. "Multiple suspects exiting the SUV. They're armed. Leave them for backup. We need to get to that warehouse." They abandoned their damaged car 2 blocks from the warehouse, approaching on foot. The building loomed ahead, its broken windows like empty eyes in the darkness. "Side entrance," Ryan whispered, pointing to a partially open door. "Recent activity. Look at the marks on the ground." They moved silently, weapons drawn. Inside, the warehouse was a cathedral of shadows, moonlight filtering through the broken roof. Their footsteps echoed on the concrete floor despite their best efforts at stealth. A child's voice cut through the darkness. "I told you I don't know where it is." Elijah's voice coming from somewhere above them. And then another voice, smooth as silk, but cold as ice. "Your mother gave you instructions, Elijah. Very specific. Instructions, just like she instructed you about Officer Carter. Tell me what else she told you." Daniel and Ryan exchanged glances, then began moving toward a metal staircase leading to a second-floor office. Each step felt like an eternity, the metal creaking softly beneath their feet. "I don't know anything else." Elijah's voice cracked with fear. "Please, I want my dad. Officer Carter is not your father." The man's voice hardened. "The DNA test proved that. Your mother lied to you, Elijah, just like she lied to a lot of people." They reached the top of the stairs. Through a dirty window, Daniel could see into the office. Elijah was tied to a chair, tears streaming down his face. A man in an expensive suit stood before him, Jared Kane himself, looking exactly like his photo in the database. "Breach on 3, Daniel mouthed to Ryan. "You take the 1. By the door, I'll handle Kane." Ryan nodded, moving into position. 1, 2. A phone rang. Kane pulled out his cell phone, answering it with his free hand. His face darkened as he listened. "What do you mean they got away?" he snapped. "Find them. They can't be far." Daniel burst. Through the door, weapon raised. "Police! Hands where I can see them!" Kane's reaction was instantaneous. He grabbed Elijah, pressing a gun to the boy's head. "Back off, Officer Carter. You're interfering with a federal investigation." "Federal investigation?" Daniel kept his weapon steady, even as his heart raced. "Is that what you call murdering? A woman and kidnapping her child?" "Vanessa Moore was a criminal," Kane said smoothly. "A witness who turned on us, tried to blackmail her way into witness protection. Her death was unfortunate, but necessary." "Dad!" Elijah's voice was small, terrified. "It's okay, buddy," Daniel said softly, never taking his eyes off Kane. "Everything's going to be okay." Kane laughed, a cold, empty sound. "Still playing daddy? How touching. But we both know the truth, don't we? The DNA test proved you're nothing. To this boy, just another cop who couldn't mind his own business. If I'm nothing, then why did Vanessa spend years making sure Elijah would find me?" Daniel took a careful step forward. "What did she know, Kane? What was worth killing her for?" Something flickered across Kane's face. Uncertainty? Fear. The woman was delusional. She thought she could expose things she didn't understand. Things bigger than all of us. "Like the trafficking ring you were investigating 9 years ago?" Ryan's voice came from behind Kane. The one that mysteriously went cold? Kane's grip on Elijah tightened. You have no idea what you're dealing with. The people I work for, they don't just make problems disappear, they make entire families disappear. Is that what happened to Elijah's real father? Daniel asked. The question made Kane's eyes narrow. Is that why there's no birth certificate, no records? Because his father was one of your victims? Careful, Officer Carter. You're asking questions. That got Vanessa killed. No, Daniel said quietly. Vanessa died because she found evidence. Evidence she hid in that notebook you're so desperate to find. Kane's composure cracked slightly. Where is it? Safe. And if anything happens to Elijah, it goes public. Every name, every transaction, every dirty little secret Vanessa collected. Is that worth risking, Kane? Are your bosses that confident in your ability to contain the damage? A bead of sweat rolled down Kane's temple. His gun hand trembled slightly. Last chance, Daniel warned. Let him go. For a moment, no one moved. Then Kane's phone rang again. He glanced at the screen, and Daniel saw real fear cross his face. The moment of distraction was all they needed. Ryan fired, the shot grazing Kane's shoulder. The man staggered, his grip on Elijah loosening. Daniel lunged forward, tackling Kane. As Ryan pulled Elijah to safety, they crashed to the floor, Kane's gun skittering away. The man fought like a cornered animal, but Daniel had rage and righteousness on his side. The fight was brief but brutal. When it was over, Kane lay handcuffed and bleeding, his expensive suit covered in dust. Dad! Elijah broke free from Ryan's grip, running to Daniel, small arms wrapped around his neck, holding on as if afraid to ever let go. I got you, buddy, Daniel whispered, hugging him close. I got you. The sound of sirens filled the air, their backup finally arriving, but Kane started laughing, a desperate, unhinged sound. You think this is over? He spat blood from his split lip. You think arresting me changes anything? The people I work for, they'll never stop. Not while the boy lives. Not while he knows. Knows what? Daniel demanded. But Kane just kept laughing, and in the distance, over the sound of approaching sirens, came another sound, the distinctive thrum of helicopter rotors. Company's coming, Ryan warned, moving to the window. And I don't think it's our backup. Daniel looked at Elijah's terrified face, then at Kane's smug one. Whatever Vanessa had known, whatever she had hidden away, it was big enough to bring a private army down on their heads. Ryan, get Elijah out of here. Use the back stairs. Stay low. What about you? Daniel checked his weapon, thinking of the notebook in his pocket. I'm going to find out what's in this thing that's worth killing for. Go. As Ryan led Elijah away, Daniel turned to Kane. Start talking. What did Vanessa see 9 years ago? What was worth orphaning her son? Kane's smile was bloody. You really want to know, Officer Carter? Are you ready to learn just how deep this rabbit hole goes? The helicopter was getting closer. Soon, the warehouse would be surrounded. Whatever answers Kane had, whatever secrets Vanessa had died protecting, they were running out of time to uncover them. The night wasn't over yet, and somewhere in the darkness, the truth was waiting to be found. The warehouse erupted in chaos as Daniel moved through the shadows, his heart pounding against his ribs. Through the maze of crates and abandoned machinery, he could hear Kane's men coordinating their search patterns. They were professionals, former military by their movements, but they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated Elijah. Clear the south entrance, a voice crackled over their radios. Target's location unknown. Daniel smiled grimly. He knew exactly where Elijah was, and more importantly, he knew what the boy was capable of. In the 3 days since the kidnapping, he'd seen enough to understand why Kane's people were so desperate to get him back. The boy's mind worked like nothing he'd ever seen. Pattern recognition, spatial awareness, mathematical computations that should have been impossible. All processed, at speeds that defied explanation. More than that, Elijah could read people with uncanny precision, predicting their movements and decisions before they made them. A shadow moved to Daniel's left. He froze, but it was Ryan, moving silent as a ghost. "They've got the building surrounded," his partner whispered. "At least 20 men, heavy weapons. But something's wrong. They're nervous." "They should be," Daniel replied softly. "They lost visual on Elijah 6 minutes ago." Ryan nodded, understanding. They'd both seen what happened when you lost track of the boy, how he could process information about his environment and use it to seemingly vanish, only to appear where you least expected him. Above them, in the warehouse's old office complex, Kane's voice rang out. "Find him! The boy doesn't leave this building." Daniel keyed his radio, keeping his voice low. "Elijah? You reading the situation?" "Yes." The boy's whisper came through clear and precise. 23 hostiles. 4 at the north exit, 6 south, the rest. Moving in standard search grid pattern. They're favoring their left sides. Weighted for body armor. Response time averaging 2.3 seconds between commands and execution. Even after everything he'd seen, Elijah's capabilities still stunned Daniel. No 8-year-old should be able to process tactical information like that. But then, no normal 8-year-old could memorize entire blueprints with a single glance, or calculate trajectory angles in their head. "What's your position?" "Maintenance tunnel, sub-level 2. They don't know about it. It's not on the current blueprints. But it was on the original 1987 plans. Mom made me memorize all of them." Course she had. Vanessa had spent years preparing Elijah for this, teaching him to use his enhanced cognitive abilities not just to survive, but to fight back. "Stay put," Daniel ordered. "We're coming to you." "No." Elijah's voice was calm, measured. "Kane's getting desperate. His superiors are demanding results. He's going to start executing hostages soon, starting with Officer Mitchell." Daniel's blood ran cold. They'd captured Ryan's partner during the initial raid. "How can you know that?" Micro-expressions in his last broadcast. Vocal stress patterns. Indicate escalating aggression. Plus, I can hear them prepping the execution site. North office, 2nd floor. The acoustics match the architecture plans. This was what made Elijah so valuable to them. Not just his enhanced mental capabilities, but the way he could process and synthesize information from multiple sources simultaneously. See patterns where others saw only chaos. "We need a distraction," Ryan muttered. An explosion. Rocked the building's north side. Not large, but precisely targeted. Fire alarms blared, sprinklers activated. Through their radios, they could hear confusion in the enemy ranks. "What did you do?" Daniel asked, already knowing the answer. "Simple chemistry," Elijah replied. "Cleaning supplies in the maintenance closet plus electrical malfunction equals exothermic reaction. They'll focus on the north side now, south entrance. We'll be down to 4 men in approximately 40 seconds. Daniel and Ryan were already moving. They'd learned to trust Elijah's calculations. They were never wrong. "You've got incoming," the boy warned. 3 hostiles moving fast. "Wait. Now." Daniel spun just as the first attacker rounded the corner. The man never saw the strike coming. None of them did. 45 seconds later, 3 unconscious bodies lay zip-tied on the floor. "How did you know the exact moment?" Ryan asked as they secured the weapons. Footstep patterns indicated their pace. Architecture told me where sound would mask their approach. Simple math. Simple for him, maybe. For everyone else, it was like watching a chess grandmaster explain basic moves. Knowing you were seeing, genius at work but unable to fully comprehend it. They made it to the maintenance tunnel entrance just as another explosion rocked the building. This one wasn't Elijah's doing. "Kane's men are setting charges," the boy reported. "They're following contingency protocols. If they can't capture me, they'll bury the evidence." "Including themselves?" "They're not planning to be here." Extraction. Helicopter incoming ETA 3 minutes. Landing pad on the roof. Daniel could hear it now, the distant thrum of rotor blades. "We need to move." "Wait." Elijah's voice was different now, hesitant. "There's something else. Something I calculated. But I didn't want to be right. What is it, buddy?" "The way they're setting the charges, the blast pattern, they're not just destroying evidence, they're covering up what's underneath this building." Daniel felt his skin crawl. "What's underneath?" "Labs. Old ones. Where they made us. Where they're Still making others like me. The implications hit Daniel like a physical blow. This wasn't just about one enhanced child. This facility was still active, still creating more children with cognitive and physical capabilities beyond normal human limits. How many? Based on the power consumption records I memorized from the city grid and the supply manifest Mom documented, at least 12. All younger than me. They're keeping them in suspended animation, waiting for their capabilities to mature. Ryan cursed softly. We need to get them out. No time, Elijah said, his voice tight with controlled emotion. The charges will blow in 7 minutes. But I can give you something better. Mom didn't just document this facility. She found all of them. Every lab, every project site, every child in the program. It's all in the numbers she made me memorize. The ones you said were a code? GPS coordinates, facility depths, security, protocols, all encoded in mathematical sequences disguised as phone numbers, addresses, social security numbers. I can recite all of them. Every site, every victim, every person involved. Now Daniel understood why Kane was willing to burn everything to the ground. Elijah wasn't just another enhanced child. He was a living database of Project Oracle's entire operation. Incoming! Ryan's shout coincided with the sound of boots on metal stairs. Sub-level access points 3 and 4, Elijah reported. 8 hostiles total. They've adjusted their search pattern. Someone told them about the maintenance tunnels. Daniel could hear Kane's voice now, closer than before. Bring him to me. Alive. Too late, Elijah said quietly. I've already calculated everything they're going to do. Every move, every decision. It's all just patterns. And patterns can be broken. What happened next would be talked about in whispered legends throughout law enforcement for years to come. How an 8-year-old boy orchestrated the takedown of an entire tactical team without ever throwing a punch. How he predicted and countered their every move, turning their own protocols against them. How he led them into dead ends and improvised traps, using their training and tactics as weapons against them. In the end, they found Kane in his command center, surrounded by monitors showing camera feeds from throughout the facility. The former federal prosecutor looked smaller somehow, his expensive suit stained with sweat, his composure cracked. You have no idea what you're interrupting, he snarled as Daniel cuffed him. The next stage of human evolution. The next stage of human weapons, you mean? Daniel cut him off. Using children as your test subjects. Test subjects? Kane laughed, bitter and hollow. That boy is worth more than 1,000 normal humans. His cognitive capabilities alone are not yours to control. Elijah's voice came from the doorway. He stood there, small but unafraid, his eyes taking in every detail of the room. I can recite every experiment, every modification, every name in your program. It's all up here. He tapped his temple. And unlike computer files, you can't delete my memories. Kane's face went pale. You can't. The fail-safes mean nothing to me. Mom made sure of that. She spent years teaching me to break your conditioning, to use what you gave me against you. And now? Elijah smiled. And for the first time, Daniel saw the weight of everything the boy carried. Every memory, every pattern, every secret of Project Oracle. Now I'm going to tell them everything. The charges detonated then, but they were already moving. Elijah had calculated the exact safe path out, timing their movements to the millisecond. As they emerged into the night air, the warehouse collapsed behind them, burying its dark secrets. But the truth couldn't be buried anymore, not with Elijah ready to expose it all. What happens now? The boy asked as they watched the building burn. Daniel placed a hand on his shoulder. Now we make them pay for what they did. To you, to your mother, to all the others. They'll try to discredit me. Say I'm just a confused child. Let them try. Some truths can't be denied. Elijah nodded, his mind already processing new patterns, new possibilities. Mom said you'd understand, said you'd see me for what I am. And what's that? Not a weapon. The boy's voice was firm. Not an experiment, just a son who needs a father. Daniel pulled him close. understanding finally why Vanessa had chosen him. Not because he was a cop, not because he could protect Elijah, but because he could love him for who he was, enhanced abilities and all. The sound of sirens filled the air as emergency vehicles approached. But Daniel knew they were past the point of danger now. Cain was in custody, and Elijah's mind held enough evidence to bring down the entire program. The war wasn't over. But for the first time since Vanessa's death, the truth had a fighting chance, and the truth had one hell of a memory. Daniel couldn't sleep. Tanya's cabin had been safe so far, hidden in the mountains with no digital footprint to trace. But it wasn't their pursuers keeping him awake. It was the sound of Elijah's voice from the next room, reciting numbers in an endless stream. Geographic coordinates 44.7326 Ren, 108.2828 de Grand W, facility depth 32 meters, security protocol Lambda 7, genetic sequence modification K138, test subject intake dates. How long has he been at it? Ryan asked, joining Daniel at the kitchen table. 3 hours. He says he needs to organize the data properly, says his mind works better at night. They'd learned more in the past day about Project Oracle than in all their previous investigation. The truth was more terrifying than they'd imagined. Not just one facility, but dozens. Not just Elijah, but generations of children, each engineered to push the boundaries of human potential. Some of these dates go back 30 years, Tanya said, emerging from the back room where she'd been transcribing Elijah's recitations. They were breeding for specific traits: enhanced memory, advanced pattern recognition, accelerated learning capabilities. Playing God with children's lives, Ryan muttered. A noise from outside made them all freeze. Elijah appeared in the doorway, his eyes rapidly scanning the room's angles and exits. Black SUV approaching, he reported calmly. Based on the engine sound and tire pattern on the gravel, approximately 2 minutes out. 5 occupants, judging by the vehicle's suspension adjustment. Daniel moved to the window, weapon ready. Even after days of witnessing Elijah's capabilities, the boy's ability to process and analyze information still amazed him. How do you do that? Ryan asked. The calculations, the patterns. How does your mind work? Like a camera that never stops recording, Elijah explained, his voice distant as he continued monitoring the approaching vehicle. Every detail, every sound, every pattern gets stored and cross-referenced. Mom said I was designed to be a perfect information processor, a human quantum computer. But you broke their programming, Tanya observed. You're not just processing, you're choosing how to use the information. A small smile crossed Elijah's face. Mom taught me that, said the one thing they couldn't. Program was free will. The SUV was visible now, its headlights cutting through the pre-dawn darkness. Daniel tensed, but Elijah remained calm. Wait, the boy said. The tire tracks, they match Hannah Fielding's vehicle. And the driver's posture indicates injury. Left side, probably ribs. Consistent with her injuries from the safe house attack. He was right. Hannah emerged from the vehicle, moving gingerly. But she wasn't alone. Multiple pursuers, Elijah reported, his mind already processing new data. Based on dust patterns on the mountain roads, 3 more vehicles following, 12 minutes behind, assuming standard pursuit protocols. Hannah, Daniel called out. Inside, quickly. She hurried in, clutching. A laptop. They're coming. The chief, he's mobilized everything. But I got what you need. She set the laptop down, hands shaking. Everything about Project Oracle. All the official files. It won't be enough, Elijah said, already scanning through the documents at impossible speed. They've sanitized these records, changed dates, altered data points. His fingers flew across the keyboard. But they made a mistake. The underlying code structure maintains original timestamps, cross-referenced with the numbers Mom, made me memorize. Understanding dawned on Daniel's face. You can prove they altered the records. Better. Elijah's eyes never left the screen. I can reconstruct the original data. Every change they made leaves a digital fingerprint, combined with the information in my head. You can expose the whole program, Hannah finished. That's Why they're so desperate to find you. You're not just a test subject, you're evidence they can't erase. Incoming vehicles, Ryan reported from the window. Coming in hot. Daniel made a quick decision. Hannah, get that laptop to the feds. Real feds, not the chief's people. Ryan, you and Tanya take the back trails. We need to split their forces. What about you and Elijah? We're the ones they want. We'll give them something to chase. Elijah was already moving, his mind calculating odds and outcomes. They'll expect us to go east, toward the highway. Their response patterns suggest a standard containment strategy. But there's a maintenance road 2 miles north that doesn't appear on current maps. How do you... Hannah started to ask. Topographical analysis plus historical logging records from 1973 to 1989. The road's overgrown but still passable. They won't factor it into their search grid. Daniel had stopped questioning how Elijah knew these things. The boy's mind was a database of seemingly infinite information, all instantly accessible and cross-referenced. They split up just as the first police cars appeared on the mountain road. Daniel and Elijah took the hidden maintenance road, while the others went their separate ways. In the rearview mirror, Daniel could see the search party splitting up, just as Elijah had predicted. They're adapting their search pattern, Elijah reported, watching the pursuers through the side mirror. The chief is implementing a standard FBI pursuit protocol, but he's made a critical error in his calculations. What error? A small smile crossed Elijah's face. He thinks he's hunting a scared child. He hasn't realized he's up against a mind that can process scenarios faster than his entire tactical team combined. As if to prove his point, Elijah began rattling off instructions. Turn left in 40 meters. They'll lose visual for approximately 8 seconds due to the tree coverage. That coincides with their radio check-in pattern. By the time they realize we've changed direction, we'll be outside their projected search grid. Daniel followed the directions without hesitation. He'd learned to trust Elijah's calculations. They were never wrong, but something else was bothering him. Back at the cabin, you said Mom taught you to break their programming. What did you mean? Elijah was quiet for a moment, his mind visibly processing the question. Project Oracle didn't just enhance our cognitive capabilities. They tried to program us, condition our enhanced minds to follow their commands without question. Most of the others, they never broke free of it. But you did. Mom figured out that emotional connections could override their programming. Real ones, not the artificial loyalty they tried to implant. She spent years teaching me to think for myself, to question everything, to use my abilities on my own terms. That's why she chose me, Daniel realized. She needed someone who could form that kind of connection with you. She said you were different. That you'd see me as a person, not a project. Elijah's voice softened. She was right. Their moment was interrupted by the sound of helicopter rotors. The chief was pulling out all the stops. Multiple aircraft approaching, Elijah reported, his mind already calculating new variables. Based on their flight patterns and the prevailing wind conditions, they're using thermal imaging. But they're not accounting for the geothermal features in this region. Meaning, there's an old mining tunnel ahead. The residual heat signatures will mask our presence. Turn right, now. The tunnel appeared exactly where Elijah said it would. They killed the lights and waited in darkness as the helicopters passed overhead. Chief Williams is getting desperate, Elijah observed, listening to the radio chatter they'd intercepted. His superiors are demanding results. Project Oracle's entire infrastructure is at risk. Because of what you know? Because of what I can prove. Elijah's voice was firm. Every experiment, every modification, every child in the program, it's all documented in my memory. Perfect recall was one of their improvements. They just never thought one of their subjects would use it against them. Daniel's phone buzzed. A text from Hannah. Files delivered to FBI Special Agent Sarah Martinez. She's trustworthy. Moving to secure location. It's starting, Elijah said quietly. The chief's communications just shifted to emergency protocols. They're implementing something called Protocol Zero. What's that? Full information containment. They'll eliminate everyone with knowledge of the program, including their own people. As if to confirm his words, gunfire erupted in the distance. The chief was cleaning house. "We need to move," Daniel said, starting the engine. "Which way?" Elijah closed his eyes, his enhanced mind processing countless variables simultaneously. Based on current pursuit patterns, weather conditions, and terrain analysis, there's a 78% probability of success if we head toward the old ranger station. The chief's tactical data doesn't account for the access road that was decommissioned in 1995. They drove in silence for several minutes, the sound of distant gunfire and helicopter rotors creating a grim backdrop. Daniel couldn't help but marvel at how calm Elijah remained, his mind constantly analyzing and adapting to new information. "You know what happens when this goes public," Daniel said finally. "Everything about Project Oracle, about what they did, to you and the others. I know. Mom prepared me for that too. Said sometimes the truth has to hurt before it can heal." A new sound cut through the night. Police sirens. But not the chief's people. State troopers, FBI, even military vehicles. The cavalry was finally arriving. "Hannah did it," Daniel breathed. "The files, combined with my testimony and perfect recall of every document, every experiment." Elijah allowed himself a small smile. Project Oracle is finished. But before they could celebrate, Elijah's posture suddenly changed. His enhanced senses had picked up something new. Multiple vehicles approaching from the north. The chief. He's not running. Based on his movement pattern and the resources he's mobilizing, the boy's eyes widened. "He's coming for us himself, and he's bringing everything he has." Daniel gripped the steering wheel tighter. "Then let's give him something to chase. Because sometimes the most dangerous weapon isn't a gun or an army or even enhanced abilities. Sometimes it's the truth, locked away in the mind of a child who remembers everything. And the truth was finally ready to come out." Dawn painted the mountain sky blood red as Chief Williams' convoy approached. Through the cover of dense forest, Daniel watched the tactical teams deploy with military precision. Beside him, Elijah lay still, his enhanced mind processing every detail of their enemy's movements. 38 personnel total, the boy whispered. Standard tactical formation, but modified for mountain terrain. Based on their equipment loadout and movement patterns, they're running a full containment protocol. Can we outmaneuver them? Elijah's eyes flickered rapidly, calculating countless variables. They're using predictive algorithms to anticipate our moves, but their software is based on standard human response patterns. They haven't adapted their calculations for enhanced cognitive capabilities. That had been their advantage from the start. The chief's people were hunting what they understood, a desperate cop and a frightened child. They weren't prepared for what Elijah really was, a mind capable of processing information faster than their most advanced computers. "The chief is implementing a 3-tier containment strategy," Elijah continued, reading the tactical patterns like a book. "But there's a flaw in their perimeter. They're not accounting for the terrain's impact on their radio communications. 20-second delay between their northern and eastern units." Daniel had learned to trust these analytical insights completely. Elijah's mind didn't just see details. It saw patterns within patterns, processing variables too complex for ordinary human comprehension. How long until the FBI's task force arrives? Based on their last known position and current weather conditions, Elijah paused, running the calculations. 18 minutes. We need to survive until then. A shot rang out, striking the tree above them. The chief's voice boomed through a megaphone. "It's over, Daniel. You have no idea what you're interfering with." But Daniel knew exactly what they were interfering with. Elijah had spent hours documenting everything, every experiment, every child in the program, every scientist and official involved. His perfect recall had turned him into a living archive of Project Oracle's crimes. "They're adjusting their formation," Elijah reported calmly. The chief's stress patterns indicate escalating desperation. "He's implementing Protocol Omega." "What's that?" "Total information containment. They'll eliminate everyone with knowledge of the program, including their own personnel." Elijah's voice remained steady, but Daniel could see the emotional toll. of processing so much data. We have 3 minutes before they start executing their own people. Daniel keyed his radio. Ryan, you copy? Here, partner. We're in position. They had planned for this. While the chief's forces focused on Daniel and Elijah, Ryan and a trusted team of state police had quietly surrounded the area. But timing would be everything. Remember what we discussed, Elijah said softly. When I give the signal, everyone must move exactly as calculated. The success rate drops to 31% if we deviate by even 2 seconds. Another shot, closer this time. The chief was done negotiating. Last chance, Daniel, he called out. Think about what you're throwing away. That boy represents the next stage of human evolution. Enhanced cognitive processing, perfect recall, predictive analysis capabilities beyond anything we've achieved artificially. He's worth more than 1,000 ordinary humans. He's a child, Daniel shouted back. A child you tried to turn into a weapon. A weapon? The chief laughed. We're creating the future. Every enhanced child in our program represents a leap forward in human potential. Elijah is just the beginning. But Elijah wasn't listening to the chief's ranting. His enhanced senses had picked up something else. Multiple vehicles approaching from the south. FBI tactical units based on their engine signatures and formation patterns. But they won't arrive in time to prevent Protocol Omega. Daniel checked his weapon. Then we move now, you ready? The boy's eyes met his, and in them Daniel saw not fear, but absolute certainty. I've calculated every possible scenario. There's only one way this ends without massive casualties. He paused, then added softly. Mom would have been proud of this plan. Daniel squeezed his shoulder. She already was, buddy. She knew exactly what you'd become. Elijah's plan was brilliant in its simplicity. While the chief's forces focused on containing them, they had failed to secure their own communications. Every radio transmission, every tactical update, every piece of data flowing through their command network, Elijah had been silently cataloging it all. Now, the boy whispered. Daniel keyed his radio and chaos erupted. Every tactical frequency suddenly filled with contradictory orders. Commands that seemed to come from the chief himself sent units scrambling in wrong directions. Authentication codes appeared compromised. Trust between units dissolved as Elijah fed their own protocols back to them in ways that created maximum confusion. How? The chief's voice crackled with rage. How are you doing this? Simple pattern analysis. Elijah's voice came through every radio, calm and clear. Your tactical protocols follow standard military algorithms. Once you understand the base pattern, disrupting it is just mathematics. The chief's forces began to fragment. Some units retreated, believing they'd received official orders. Others, frozen in confusion as their command structure collapsed. A few turned on their own teammates, unable to distinguish friend from foe in the communication chaos. You see what he can do? The chief was shouting now, his composure shattered. The perfect tactical processor, a mind that can outthink our best computers, and you want to waste that potential? You still don't understand, Daniel called back. His abilities aren't what make him special. It's his humanity, the very thing you tried to program out of him. Elijah's voice cut through every channel again, implementing final sequence. The boy had predicted everything, how the chief would react, where his people would move, even how the terrain would affect their response times. Now those predictions played out with mathematical precision as Ryan's team closed the trap. The Fuhr. Chief found himself suddenly isolated, his forces scattered or contained. But instead of surrendering, he raised his weapon. If I can't have him, he snarled. No one will. Multiple shots rang out, but Elijah had calculated this too. The chief's emotional state, his firing stance, even the wind's effect on his aim. All processed and factored into the final plan. Every bullet missed its mark. State police swarmed in, followed moments later by FBI tactical teams. The chief's remaining forces, their command structure in shambles, surrendered without resistance. As they led the chief away in handcuffs, he kept staring at Elijah with a mixture of rage and awe. You could have been a god, he spat. We were creating gods. No, Elijah said quietly. You were creating prisoners. The only difference is, I learned how to break free. The aftermath unfolded exactly as Elijah had predicted. FBI agents documented everything, while the boy recited names, dates, and locations with perfect clarity. Every child in the program, every facility, every person involved, all preserved in his enhanced memory. Hours later, they sat in the FBI field office, watching the news coverage explode across every channel. Project Oracle exposed, dozens of arrests, enhanced children freed from facilities across the country. What happens now? Elijah asked, his voice small and tired after hours of providing testimony. Now, Daniel said softly, we make sure nothing like this ever happens again. Hannah appeared in the doorway, holding a thick folder and wearing a smile. I have something for you both. Emergency custody papers. Given the extraordinary circumstances, the judge was persuaded to expedite things. Daniel's heart skipped a beat. You mean? Congratulations, Hannah said, holding out the folder. You're officially a father. Elijah looked up at Daniel, his enhanced mind for once not calculating or analyzing, just feeling. Really? Even though... DNA doesn't make a father, Daniel said firmly. Love does. Choice does. And I chose you the moment you ran up to me on that street. Just like Mom knew you would, Elijah whispered. She calculated the probability was 94.3% that you'd protect me. But she said the numbers weren't what mattered. She said your heart was what made her certain. Ryan appeared with coffee and news. You guys see the reports? They found the other kids. Dozens of them, all with enhanced cognitive capabilities. They're calling it the Oracle generation. They'll need help, Daniel said. Guidance. People who understand what they've been through. People. Like us? Elijah asked hopefully. Daniel smiled. Exactly like us. Through the window they could see the sun setting on a world forever changed. Project Oracle was exposed, its architects facing justice. The enhanced children would grow up free, their remarkable abilities their own to control. And in a small office in the FBI building, a father and son who had chosen each other held on tight, knowing that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Because sometimes the strongest bonds aren't written in DNA but in the choices we make. Sometimes the best families are the ones we build ourselves, piece by piece, choice by choice, love by love. Elijah dozed off against Daniel's shoulder, his enhanced mind finally resting after processing so much information. Daniel held him close, thinking of the journey that had brought them here. Of a desperate boy running up to a cop on the street. Of a mother's brilliant final plan to protect her son. Of a conspiracy exposed, and a family forged in the flames of truth. The Oracle generation would need protectors, guides, family, and they would be there, father and son, chosen family, ready to help build a world where no child would ever again be seen as just an experiment, because in the end, that's what family does. They protect, they choose, they love, and they never let go. As darkness fell over the city, Daniel watched his son sleep, marveling at how something so extraordinary could also be so perfectly normal. Elijah might have been designed to be a human computer, but he had become something far more important. He had become a son, a boy who needed not just protection but love, not just guidance but understanding. And Daniel had become something he never expected, a father. Not because of DNA or destiny, but because sometimes love is the most powerful algorithm of all. The night deepened, but neither of them moved. They had fought for this moment, earned it with truth and courage and choice. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles, new chances to protect the Oracle generation. But for now, in this quiet moment, they were simply father and son. And that was the greatest enhancement of all. If this story touched your heart, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more compelling narratives that explore the depths of human connection. Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss our next adventure into the extraordinary moments that change lives forever. Remember, Sometimes the greatest heroes aren't the ones born with special abilities. They're the ones who choose to stand beside those who need them most.